Aloha Hawaii, this is Pokalai Nui and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. Isn't it a beautiful song to wake up to or to greet us in the morning? The sun is up and everything seems to be fine. We have been talking about the ABC triangle of peace and violence. It can also be applied to many other studies of individual actions, community actions, and how we relate to one another. I was speaking about that in more particular terms with regards to teachers coming into a community and teaching to that community. And so what I was explaining was, as an individual teacher who comes in, who carries his triangle with him or her, and then meets up with students, and you may find the student seems to be sleepy, the head on the table, or thoughts obviously about other things or other places. And if the teacher does not really understand that triangle of that individual, what the conditions are, what his attitudes and his behaviors are, and the rest, you cannot really judge or you cannot really see into what is happening in the child's mind. He may be homeless, didn't have opportunity to sleep that night, or parents were fighting, or whatever the conditions were. So you need to understand the conditions of the community, the conditions of your students, in order to be effective in assisting the student to develop the best kind of behaviors given the attitudes and conditions. But not only that, you need to address the changes in attitudes and the changes in conditions, as well as the changes in behavior, to help that individual. Oftentimes these individuals may be helpless, unable to make their own change. It may be a child at the age of 6 or at the age of 8 who comes from certain conditions, and so their attitudes are based on survival. Their attitudes are based on resistance or persistence or whatever it is that will get them to certain goals. And so one needs to be far deeper than just understanding what mathematics is and what science is and what cooking is and all of the other skills that you come in to teach about. A good teacher is one who understands all of those things, understands the issues of deep culture that flow through the society, and try to assist in the building of that condition and building of different societies with changes in the deep culture. The program, or this radio program, only extends for another less than an hour at this point, and I will not have time to go into all of those issues, but generally that was a discussion that we had, and the result, I think it was good, because we had quite excellent responses that came back, and those folks who create the curriculum and the direction of this Teach for America group expressed great satisfaction with the visit. So, given that, I'm going to end that discussion unless any of you would like to call in and continue to explore that. There's so many other things happening. Next week, I understand, is election day, and all of those things are going on, and it'll be very revealing as to what occurs there, and of course things happening in the international arena, and there's just not enough time, I guess, in terms of radio time to investigate all of these very interesting things. We do have a caller, and so we'll go to that caller online. Our telephone number here is 524-1080. Let's go to our next caller. Aloha, caller. Welcome to the program.
Poka.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to explore a bit more on what you were discussing.
Okay.
Your talk to the Teach for America teachers who came here. Yesterday you said that some people in the program, I guess after they heard your discussion, they wanted to talk to you. Could you expand on that?
Well, you see, there were two discussions that we had, and the first one was of the teachers themselves, new teachers coming into the trade of teaching, and others who had been teaching but were coming into Hawaii to teach. And so after that discussion, then the follow-up was to also bring in the core people in Teach for America who basically gave direction and were in the organizing side. Many of them had teaching experience themselves, but they were, I guess, more the administrative groups who came in and wanted to continue with that discussion. The discussion itself was essentially the same, and of course any presentation that I give there will be variations based on the time or based on the different audience or different questions. So the second gathering was again a discussion with more questions about what do you mean by this. For example, one of the questions was, how do we prepare a student to work under an OLA deep culture when the systems that we put them into are all die systems? And I got to teach them how to be survivors within the system that exists. So how do I bring about these or match the conflict as one question, and therefore the discussion goes into that area. What I said was that before you can change attitudes, you have to understand what one's attitude is. Before you can change deep culture, you have to understand what a deep culture is. And for many of us, we don't even take the time to explore or even ask the question whether or not we have deep-seated cultures or belief systems. Secondly, once discovering what a deep culture is from your community or from your culture, and most of us come from a domination, individualism, and exclusion culture without even thinking about it. So as we explore deep culture, then what I believe we need to do is propose alternate deep cultures, and that's why I come up with a deep culture of OLA rather than just understanding that we are from a Dai deep culture. And then the real test is, how do we now take OLA and replace the values of OLA into the systems that now envelop the DIE, deep culture. It's not enough just to understand the DIE deep culture and be successful in that culture, but to carry with you some hope of changing the systems so that they reflect an OLA deep culture. Otherwise, we leave the system as it is, the conditions remain the same. We understand what the conditions are, but we don't have a tool for making the changes. So that's one of the part of the discussions that we had.
You didn't have anybody who would question the worth or the worthiness of the OLA culture?
Not in the two groups that I had for the teachers, because essentially I would suggest that the vast majority of people understand that the values of OLA is far greater than the values of Dai. You know, it's so obvious to people that they recognize that the system that we now have is dying, it's collapsing, and it's killing us, and that they can see the value in OLA. The greater the resistance is in the success or the prospects of really making changes in the systems, in the formal systems. And so what at that point what is needed is not teaching what OLA is, but teaching how to make the change and supporting one another in making the change. It's very hard for one individual to go into a system and say that, you know, I'm going to follow a new economic system. I'm going to follow sharing and caring rather than maximizing my profit. If he does it alone, then he's going to get killed, because because everyone's going to come in and borrow from him and take and not pay back, and then continue in that capitalist system. But if you have a wider commonality of thought into developing new cultures, only then can it be successful. So instead of merely being only practitioners, we need to also be advocate and converters of others into this shared system. So that is where I think the not necessarily the resistance, but the questions and concerns are: how do we make the change? How do we follow a new economic order? And that's and in commenting and in observing what is happening and what should be. For example, my comments with regards to the Olympics and how we keep following a Dai rather than an Ola deep culture as we look at the Olympics. Then people say, yeah, I never thought of that because I too joined in the cheerleading for a particular team or things like that. So my eyes didn't see the athleticism purely for the athleticism, but it was always valued in terms of now I'm going to count points as to what country got more medals. So it's a constant challenge for individuals, and so that's the kind of discussion, and that's the kind of resistance that I have from people about switching to Ola. But they all recognize, yeah, we got to do it, but they're not sure how to do it.
So you didn't have anybody who perhaps would have disputed the accuracy of your assessment of Dai deep culture in America?
No, not really, because when I speak, I always leave room. And so let's take for America and for Hawaii. I never applied exclusively only to America or only to Hawaii, either one or other deep culture. I always say that in all societies you will find a softer side to it, more on the Ola side, and you will also find the side that expresses the hard style. You find that both in Hawaii, you find it in Hawaiian culture, you find it in the United States, in that history of America. You find a very soft style among the Quakers, for example, and their relationship to the environment, their relationship to the Indians, their relationship to others. Even the period of time where you have the witch hunts going on, you also have people who were more caring and sharing and protective. So you always have those two sides. It seems that, and sometimes we can associate it more to the masculine side, the more direct action, the physicality side, the more powerful side, and that we give credit to them, or they have come in and taken up credit. They have rewritten the books to exemplify this this more masculine side. But there are also this other side that always accompanies it, and that's, I guess, part of the yin-yang. And what we need to do is pay more attention to honor the yin side, the softer side, the side of the heart rather than necessarily of the mind, that kind of stuff. So I tell people, don't see it as a cultural issue or as a racial issue. See it as being the conditions of the human being who have both the yin and the yang, and what we need is far more of the other than we have been giving credence to. So then it's not, they don't take it so defensively and getting into the argument about, well, my country is the best country and this and that and all that kinds of stuff.
Right. Yeah. I think of an example, Pok, of several years back. In fact, this is going back quite a few years ago. It was an outstanding example of a combination of Dai and Ola. Mm-hmm. And a competitor who was able to turn one off and turn the other on. It was at the state cross-country meet, for the state championship for cross-country. and the boys. And the top two runners kind of separated themselves from the rest of the field. They knew each other very well. They had raced a number of times before. As the race went along, though, the lead runner recognized, hey, where is, where's the other guy?
Yeah.
Now they're running, I think he was running on Maui. And, across country, sometimes they run in out of the way areas, yeah? So what had happened was the second place guy, he got lost actually, yeah? So the first place runner, as time went on, he became more aware of it. He said, hey, you know what, I bet he got lost. Don't know where he's going. So at that point, he went stop. He turned back, and he went searching after the guy. And calling out for him because he was really concerned. Yeah, he said, hey, what if he, can find his way back,
Yeah.
We're running out of the thing like, well, this was certainly off-road, yeah?
Yeah.
And he found the boy, and then he told him, hey, bro, you got lost, you know that? And I said, yeah. So I said, yeah, come with me, I'll go show you the way back. So they got back on the course, and they said, okay, now from here, let's resume the race now. Yeah? So, and then the guy who was leading, went back for another boy. He went on to win the race anyway. But it shows you the way that this guy, he was able to turn one off and then go turn the other on.
Yeah.
At the appropriate time. Yeah. I think it's an outstanding example.
Yeah.
And when I heard this story, I thought, hey, wow, that guy's parents, but they must really be proud of him.
Yeah.
Because there was a point in the race where he said, hey, you know what? I don't care about finishing first. I want to make sure this guy is all right. Because another thing too, how I know he never get hurt. Yeah. And then this is not like in a lot of high school sports. You get people watching, right? Then somebody gonna come help you right away.
Right.
Cross country, it might take a while before they find out. Hey,
that somebody
something
never
happened to you.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really an outstanding example. And to top it off too, the guy went on to win anyway. So it's, I guess maybe he was confident. He was so confident.
Yeah.
Perhaps that was it. He thought, hey, you know what? I'm so good, but I don't need to just pour it on here.
Yeah.
Let me make sure this other guy is okay. And so wow, that's an example of both, I guess, die and Ola, but maybe less on the die, right? And a little more on the Ola.
Yeah. And I believe even people who follow Ola can still be triumphant in races or in competition and things like that. But it's deep-seated. What do you carry with you? What are your codes that you possess? And in one of the questions when they ask, how do I convince the student that he can still survive and yet he needs to operate in a die system, one of my response was, first of all, is awareness. To understand that there are systems that have values in them, and the values that you would like to carry are not the values that are expressed or cherished or rewarded. Okay, so the first step is awareness. And even if you need to operate in a die system, be aware that this is just part of the theater that you are operating in. And then to the extent that you can find opportunities to change it, then you try to change it. You cannot create, I don't think you can create, or it's very difficult to create your own institutions in which you're going to create your own values. I believe what needs to be done is the institutions that now exist, because they're so powerful. Let's take the judicial system. so powerful that rather than creating your own judicial system because people are not going to respect it or they're going to perhaps abuse it, you need to carry your values into and invade the existing system with new values, new expressions, and then begin to make that change. In the legal system, for example, we can see that the courts are now trying to move towards much more mediation rather than trials, and they are encouraging, and in fact that sometimes they are requiring that the parties engage in mediation, and you're finding in contracts much more arbitration rather than going to court. So it's supposed to be an attempt to move more towards an OLA system, although they are not using those words, but they are seeing that this continual confrontation is not the most effective way in which the general societies operate. So there are some movements there, but the first step is you needed to have awareness, to recognize that there are problems within the system, and then begin to make the change. Too many of our attorneys, our judges, and people in our political system do not even appreciate that. They think everything is fine, and it's okay, the die system worked for me, and so that's how we continue. Yeah.
Well, the die system works for them, yeah. Oh man.
And as I said at that gathering, I said, you know, in the end, we may all be able to create winners in the rat race. But the result is, if they all turn into rats themselves, then have we really succeeded in creating good, strong individuals? Or we just created rats? So I guess that's another way of doing it. You know, you can make successful warriors who only kill, and as they kill, they become successful. But what has your success been in creating human beings? You know.
So, in your experience with these teachers, do you do this? I guess you've been doing this, or your wife has. Maybe sometimes you've filled in for some time now.
Yeah, a number of years.
Yeah. And do they find the information that you present to them very helpful to them?
The feedback I have had with some of the teachers who, after several years of teaching in the schools, and then they come back, more often it has been personally rewarding for themselves, because it gives them more or a deeper introspection of who they are oftentimes, and they've learned about these ideas of Dai and Ola, of deep culture, of how to approach people. It's not necessarily they learn how to change teaching techniques, because many of them are new teachers coming in, so they're able to explore these techniques, but it's not in contrast to an older system. I have had some practiced teachers who have sat in, and they have expressed a great surprise in the depth of a new understanding that they are coming across. One person had been retired from Nanakuli High School. She was part of the community many years, over 20 years teaching at Nanakuli, but without this kinds of introspection into their career and into themselves and into looking at the community that they are teaching in. You know, you just come in, you just graduated from college, you have a degree, and you're going to teach students the way you were taught. And so she saw her career as merely that. Now being retired, she says, oh wow, you folks really talk about deep stuff, things I never even explored in my own teaching career. Yeah, so you have some of that as some of the responses. But of course, you know, I'm not trying to set myself up as as a teacher of teachers, or the education area being my specialty, I think this is common sense. And as we work with communities in either in this radio program or in the mental health area or in whatever area we engage in, these are things that we should all carry ourselves into our relationship with others.
Did you have any of the people in that program, Teach for America, who took exception to your questioning whether they were here to
colonize,
create Yankee clones?
No, that was not the response. In fact, I asked folks about this idea of Teach for America here in Hawaii, and what does that remind them of. And one guy came up and said, colonization. Simply the colonizers. There's music in the background which is pushing me off for a few minutes. You can hang on and you can call back.
I'll call back.
Okay, thanks for the call. Take care. Aloha. And this is Pokalainu.
Kaulana nā pua o Hawaii, Kupa'a mahope o ka aina, Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, Pala pala anunu me ka paka. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, Koku ana honoa o Pilani, Ka ko'o mai kaua I o mano, Pa'apu me ke one o ka kuhi hewa. Aolea e kau I ka pulima, Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi, Ho'ohui ai nā ku ai hewa, I ka pono sivila a o ke kanaka. Aole makoa e mina mina, I ka pu'u kala o ke au